Ever feel like you're just trying to drink from a fire hose of information? Especially, when you're trying to grasp a new approach or strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Information overload is real.
Well, today we're diving deep into a concept that offers a surprisingly simple yet really powerful shortcut to making a real impact.
Sounds intriguing. Focusing on efficiency? Maybe.
Right.
Not just more effort.
Exactly. We're unpacking this idea of persons of peace. It's the term gaining traction in missional work, sure, but it really holds valuable insights for, well, anyone looking to build influence and understanding.
Within their own networks, you mean?
Yeah, whether that's professional, community-based, or even just, among friends.
And it's interesting, this idea of finding key individuals. It seems to resonate across different fields, doesn't it?
It does. And you shared a really detailed exploration of this. It draws from theology, biblical examples, sure, but also modern stuff like sociological models,
Yes.
Network theory even.
Which basically says influence often spreads best through certain well-connected people, right?
Precisely. So our mission today is to pull out the core insights, to understand how this framework gives you a fresh lens on building meaningful connections and, frankly, achieving your goals more effectively.
We're looking at a strategy that's, well, it's time-tested, but still seems incredibly relevant today.
Okay, so mission clear. What is a person of peace? Why is this approach so powerful, so efficient? And crucially, how can you identify and connect with these key individuals? Prepare for some potential aha moments here.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this. The material you shared suggests the future of, let's say, meaningful impact. It isn't always about doing more or reaching more people directly.
Right, it's about finding the right people at the right time. And crucially, in places where receptivity already exists.
That's a big shift, isn't it? We often think impact equals scale. Bigger is better.
But these sources are pointing towards something different, something more focused.
And at the heart of it is this person of peace concept. These aren't just, friendly faces or people already nodding along. They're described as, get this, divinely positioned gateways.
Access points.
Yeah.
Hidden accelerators even.
Yeah. It's like finding a more direct route to connection, skipping some of the usual barriers.
What's fascinating is that emphasis on recognizing existing openness. It moves away from trying to create receptivity where maybe it just isn't there yet.
Right. And the research really highlights the inefficiency of just sort of broad attractional approaches. Build a big event, hope people come.
The build it and they will come model.
Exactly. It often fails because it overlooks this spiritual receptivity at the margins, as the sources put it. While some focus on attracting crowds, real momentum often lies in seeing who's already being stirred and then stepping into their existing relational webs.
Which makes sense if you think about how movements often start, doesn't it? Usually with a small connected group.
Totally. So this isn't about crafting the perfect event to open doors. It's more about learning to weave connections, grassroots style, through these key individuals. It's a real perspective shift.
It makes you stop and think, are your current efforts mostly about casting a wide net? Or are you really focused on nurturing specific key relationships?
Good question. Now, this obviously brings up where this idea comes from. It's not some new management fad, right?
No, not at all.
The person of peace principle. It's actually rooted in Jesus' own strategy, specifically Luke 10, verses 1 to 12, when he sent out the 72 disciples.
And that historical, that theological grounding.
Yeah.
It gives it a lot of weight, a lot of enduring relevance.
Absolutely. And look at Jesus' instructions. It's striking. He didn't say, go hold big public rallies or target the Roman officials, the influencers of the day.
No, he was very specific.
He told them to find the person in each house who welcomes them. Find the welcomer.
And the rationale, according to the sources, is that real, genuine transformation. It often starts in households, in those intimate relational spheres. Not necessarily in the headlines.
And there's that powerful quote, Luke 10.56. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him.
These sons of peace.
Yeah.
Or persons of peace.
Right. They're described as the spiritual gateway to a community. Not always the most prominent person, maybe not the loudest.
But the most prepared. Due to, perhaps, divine timing. An alignment of the heart.
Exactly. The insight is Jesus' focus on these individuals of welcome. It shows deep impact often starts small relationally.
And they have this inherent openness, right?
Right.
Which makes them receptive, but also makes others in their network more likely to listen to them.
Yeah, and the material gives some fantastic biblical examples that really paint a picture. First, Cornelius, Acts 10.
The Roman centurion.
Yeah, a Roman, a Gentile. But his generosity, his prayers, they made him this crucial bridge between Jews and Gentiles, opened up a whole new frontier for the early message. He wasn't part of the establishment, but he was ready.
It shows influence isn't always tied to formal position, is it? It's about that God-given receptivity, even in unexpected people.
Totally. Then there's the Samaritan woman, John chapter 4.
Talk about unexpected.
Right. A woman with a, let's say, scandalous past. But she becomes the first evangelist to her whole village after meeting Jesus. She wasn't a theologian.
But she was a relational catalyst.
Yeah.
Her own experience sparked something in her community.
Exactly. And finally, Lydia, Acts 16, a businesswoman.
Right, the seller of purple cloth.
Her home becomes the launch pad for the church in Philippi, all because she was open to Paul's message, a gateway to a whole region.
These examples really drive home their function, don't they?
They do. They weren't just passive receivers. The sources call them architectural keystones, God-ordained access points for broader impact.
They weren't just changed themselves. They naturally helped change spread through their relationships.
Okay, so this leads us to why. Why does this strategy, finding the person of peace, actually work? The sources get into the spiritual and social dynamics.
Yeah, this is where ancient wisdom seems to align pretty well with modern understanding of how humans connect.
Right. First, there's what the sources term the divine economy. Receptivity is key. The idea is the spirit often goes ahead of the messenger, preparing hearts, softening the ground, so to speak.
So it's not about us forcing ideas onto people who aren't ready or interested.
Exactly. It encourages us to look for where there's already a stirring, some kind of inclination.
Makes sense.
Then there's the huge emphasis on relational capital, persons of peace. They have existing trust within their networks, history, familiarity.
Right, people already know and respect them to some degree.
So when they become receptive to a new idea or a new way of thinking, they naturally open their networks. Engagement becomes an invitation from someone trusted, not an intrusion from an outsider.
Like getting a warm introduction versus a cold call.
Precisely. And as you mentioned earlier, the sources point out how this lines up with network theory. Influence spreads through these well-connected individuals, these hubs.
It's fascinating how these, well, ancient principles really do resonate with contemporary social science.
It really is. Okay, so implications for today. How do we take this framework, this person of peace idea, and actually apply it in our own lives, regardless of our job or goals?
This is where it gets really practical for you, the listener.
Yeah.
How does this translate into action?
Well, the material talks about reframing outreach, moving from what it calls extractional models.
Where you're trying to pull people in to your thing, your program.
Right. To more incarnational models,
Yeah.
which is about embedding yourself within communities, looking for that existing receptivity. The example given is, Jesus invested in people, not just program.
Which requires being present, right?
Yeah.
Really engaged where you are, not just broadcasting.
And it's not just for formal ministry settings. The sources highlight marketplace application. Think about your job.
Okay.
A person of peace there. Maybe it's the manager who's surprisingly open to a moment of quiet reflection, or that colleague who keeps asking deeper questions, the client looking for more than just a transaction.
So these aren't just random occurrences.
The sources suggest seeing them as potential divine clues. The idea is influence isn't confined to church walls or specific settings. It extends everywhere.
It encourages you to see daily interactions as potential connection points, potential avenues for impact.
And for anyone involved in building communities, movements, whatever, this strategy is presented as, crucial. Discipling persons of peace, the sources say, builds movements because these individuals often hold the cultural keys.
They understand the local context intuitively.
Exactly. And they help naturally integrate new ideas in a way that makes sense locally. They become those natural champions.
Leading to more sustainable growth, presumably.
Okay, this all sounds great, but practically, how do we do it? How do we actually build this architecture, as the sources phrase it?
Right, let's get down to the tangible actions. What can you actually do?
First step highlighted. Pray with eyes open, which means actively looking for signs of receptivity. Questions, kindness, curiosity, asking for insight to spot those prepared individuals around you.
It's about being more intentional in your awareness, isn't it? Not just going through the motions.
Then a big one, listen more than you speak. Pay attention. What are people's needs, their hurts, their longings? Try to sense where there might already be a stirring, something deeper happening.
That active listening piece is so crucial for understanding where someone truly is.
Key takeaway here seems to be prioritizing that genuine listening and connection over just running your program or pushing your agenda.
Definitely.
Next up, serve authentically. Build trust through genuine care, practical help, without an immediate agenda, without expecting something right back.
That demonstrates real care, builds that foundation of trust you mentioned earlier.
Which leads right into building genuine relationships. Moving past the superficial chit-chat to deeper connections, shared experiences, maybe some vulnerability.
Investing in people, not just seeing them as means to an end.
The sources also say, try to identify relational hubs. Look for those people who naturally connect different groups, whose opinions seem to carry weight in their circles. They could be key persons of peace.
Those natural networkers, the connectors.
And once you've identified potential persons of peace, the advice is invest deeply, strategically. Focus your time, your energy where there seems to be the most openness, the most potential.
Being focused and intentional with your relational energy.
And finally, equip for multiplication. Empower them. Help them share their own insights. Connect their networks. The goal isn't building your own following.
It's empowering them to become connectors themselves. That's how it spreads organically, sustainably.
Now, the sources make this really important distinction. Attractional versus incarnational models. Can you break that down a bit more, maybe intuitively?
Sure. Think of it like this. Attractional is like throwing a big party and hoping people show up. Incarnational is more like being invited into someone's living room for coffee and conversation.
Okay, so attractional, often centralized, maybe focused on a place or event, can be more professionalized, polished presentations, expert speakers.
Right, event-driven. It assumes if you offer high quality, people will just be drawn in. The church or organization is the hub, pulling people towards the center.
And the material notes, while that works sometimes, it can struggle where trust in institutions is low, right?
Exactly. In post-Christian contexts or among marginalized groups, that model can face headwinds.
Okay. Now, incarnational, where the person of peace strategy really fits, that's different. It's decentralized, much more relational, adaptive to the local culture.
And it's described as more spirit-dependent, less reliant on just human planning and production.
Right. It assumes influence, or the kingdom's work, starts by going out, not just waiting for people to come in. Mission becomes centrifugal, moving outwards into everyday life.
Meeting people where they are, on their turf, essentially.
And a huge part of this incarnational shift is empowering the everyday person. The person of peace model makes regular folks the primary carriers of influence, decentralizes ministry impact.
It leverages the power of those existing personal relationships. Think about it. You're much more likely to listen to a recommendation from a friend you trust.
Totally. The sources also really stress the importance of just being with people. Incarnational engagement is about building trust, serving tangibly, listening deeply.
Sharing authentically.
Yeah, over pushing for immediate conversions or selling an agenda.
It's about creating that space for deeper conversations to happen naturally, organically.
And those biblical examples we talked about, Luke 10, the early church meeting in homes, Lydia opening her home, they're all highlighted as examples of this incarnational approach in action.
They show how huge movements can start from very simple, very relational connections.
Right. This leads to a really interesting point about the harvest field. The sources challenge that idea that, all ground is equally receptive all the time.
That's a crucial piece of discernment, isn't it? Our efforts are often way more fruitful when we recognize where there's already some readiness.
Exactly. It's a shift from trying to, manufacture receptivity.
Which can feel like pushing uphill.
Right. To learning to discern readiness, to partner with what the Spirit might already be doing rather than trying to force things. The material points to John 6.44, no one comes unless drawn, and John 3.8, the Spirit moves where it will, emphasizes that divine aspect.
It's about aligning our efforts with God's activity rather than just relying on our own strategy.
So what does ripe look like then? The sources suggest things like, openness, curiosity, people expressing needs, a genuine desire to learn or explore something new. When you find a person of peace, the work shifts, doesn't it, from persuasion
to participation. You're joining something that already resonates with them. It's much more natural, more collaborative.
And how do we discern this ripeness? It seems to come back to prayerful attentiveness, listening more than speaking. There it is again.
It keeps coming up.
Observing relational dynamics, being sensitive to those moments that feel like maybe divine appointments or meaningful coincidences, and just slowing down, taking a relational pace, not a programmatic one.
It requires that sensitivity to human interaction and a trust in, Spiritual guidance, I suppose.
And ultimately, this approach is about resource stewardship, focusing your limited resources, time, energy, money, where the spiritual ROI is likely highest.
Meaning where there's readiness
Yeah.
and that potential for multiplication we talked about, being wise and strategic with our investment.
Yeah, and that idea of focused investment leads right into multiplication. The sources describe it as influence going viral relationally, like ripples in a pond or yeast in dough.
An organic spread through interconnected lives, not just adding one person at a time.
And here we go again with network theory. Influence flows through nodes, people, and edges relationships. Persons of peace are often those strategically located nodes.
The hubs, the bridges, the super spreaders within their networks.
And transformation just travels fastest through trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Which highlights the power of empowering people within their existing social structures.
The sources really emphasize this shift away from institutional programs being the main engine of growth towards relational discipleship happening in everyday life. And a key outcome is the rise of indigenous leadership.
Leaders emerging from within the context.
Right. Ensuring cultural fluency, relational credibility, long-term presence. It fosters a much more authentic, sustainable movement.
Makes perfect sense.
So practically, how do we foster this multiplication? Steps outlined include identify those persons of peace who are already bearing fruit, starting conversations, gathering others, wanting to lead, then train them through practice, that classic see one, do one, teach one model.
Learning by doing, essentially.
Then empower them, offer coaching, tools, resources, but celebrate the diversity of how they do things. And finally, crucially, encourage them to reproduce the pattern, find their persons of peace, start the cycle again.
It becomes a self-replicating model of growth and influence.
Now, underneath all this strategy and practice, there are some key theological pillars mentioned that, well, they make this more than just a clever method. Can you touch on those briefly?
Certainly. These foundations give it deeper meaning, explain why it resonates spiritually.
Okay. One pillar, the kingdom as a relational tapestry. God works through connections. Another, Missio Dei, through prepared people, God prepares hearts. Multiplication, not addition influence, spreading virally through relationships.
Hospitality as sacred space is in other homes, everyday gatherings being key mission grounds.
And finally, discernment over efficiency, needing spiritual ears more than just slick strategic models.
These really highlight the relational, spirit-led core of the whole approach.
So bringing this all back home for you, the listener, practical implications. Remember, this isn't just for pastors or missionaries.
No, it applies right where you are. Professional settings, community work, everyday influence. It's a way to engage your world with more intention.
So some immediate steps you could take. Start praying for discernment, right in your own sphere. Who around you shows openness, influence, hospitality? Think about maybe one relationship you could invest in more intentionally this week. Focus on listening, genuine connection.
And maybe reflect. Does your current approach lean more towards big programs, broad outreach? Or is it focused on individual relationships?
Just small shifts in focus, really, but they could yield significant results.
Exactly.
So to wrap up, the person of peace strategy, it offers this powerful, efficient way to navigate complex situations, build meaningful influence. How? By focusing on identifying and investing in those individuals God has already prepared, people who are central in their own networks.
It's about working smarter, leveraging existing relational architecture, not just harder.
It's a strategy that's both deeply rooted theologically and remarkably practical.
And it connects right back to that desire for efficient knowledge game you mentioned at the start.
Yeah. It's a shortcut, in a way. Tapping into existing receptivity and influence leads to more sustainable, impactful results than just casting a super wide, untargeted net.
Finding those key leverage points for meaningful change.
Okay, so here's a final thought, maybe some food for thought for you to mull over. Consider the untapped potential just sitting there in your own network, who might be a person of peace you haven't really recognized yet, and what could be unlocked if you intentionally sought them out, built a genuine connection.
It's really an invitation, isn't it, to see the people around you with a fresh perspective, a renewed sense of possibility.
We've really just scratched the surface here. This is a rich concept. The sources you provided go much deeper theologically, practically. We definitely encourage you to revisit them, think about how these principles apply right in your specific context.
There's always more to explore.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us and engaging in this deep dive today.